back to this. What's I think is going on here is that you're right, Tom. In the beginning, I think Bob Iger was very confident because he's cocky as hell. He always has been. He's an egomaniac. We've talked about that a million times. And he doesn't like losing. He doesn't admit failure. I don't think Disney really knew. I mean, it's not like they're counting their own votes. These are done by third-party firms that do this kind of stuff. I think in the beginning that Disney had an inkling that this was going to be difficult more than they originally thought when it started, because even though Disney may not be watching every vote that comes in, what they do know is that people like Alexia Quadrani, who is their chief investment liaison for all of these, for all the Disney investors. She was appointed by Bob Chapek, matter of fact, chief investment officer. I forget what they call the actual title she has, but you get my point. She's the one that always is connecting Disney corporate, the board, to the people like J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, so on and so forth. That's her job. She was a coverage analyst, I think, for, was it Chase or Morgan Stanley before she joined Disney? She covered the entertainment sector. She used to call into the Disney earnings calls to ask questions. And it's not uncommon that people like that eventually get hired by one of the companies that they covered for years when they want to retire from that job. But I think she knew, talking to all these mutual fund companies, because that's her job, is to stay plugged into the people that own their stock. I think she kind of knew that a lot of them were considering this. I think she knew, and therefore Disney knew going in, that there were a lot of mutual fund companies out there, a lot of hedge funds, a lot of investors that were looking at this like a change couldn't hurt. And I think they knew going in that this was going to be an uphill fight. Now we've got this leak coming out from somebody to the Wall Street Journal saying, yeah, as a matter of fact, with 22% of the vote in, Peltz is up. So now we know why definitively. This is what's been going on with Disney now for the last several months. This is why they've had these commercials. Hell, they're running their Vote Disney commercials on my YouTube videos. Okay? That's how funny it is. I mean, I've had Disney commercials running on my YouTube videos for years. So, I mean, I joke with people. It's like, yeah, Disney literally pays the bills here in more ways than you imagine. I didn't tell them to advertise on my channel. That's just what's there a lot of times. But that is continuing now with the Vote Disney stuff. I would love it if Trian had some Restore the Magic videos rolling before my YouTube stuff. Some commercials for them, too. I don't know. I have YouTube Premium, so I don't see the ads. I have no idea. But I think that's what's going on with this. And I think that's why this is going to come down to the wire.
I think something else that helped to build upon what you're saying, what Ron talked about, and Tom's observation, I think there's something else that happened too, which is that I want to say that white paper, that 143-page document that was put out by Peltz, was incredibly well-crafted, well-researched. The presentation was outstanding. And one of the things that if I'm a fund manager or I'm managing assets for a family office, and again, for those who don't know what a family office is, a family office, there's a lot of these stocks are held up by family offices where, let's say, grandpa put in his trust that he had a bucket load of stock. And so a family office is like a mini mutual fund, if you will. It's a mini portfolio. The only caveat is that they're typically anywhere from $5 to $500 million, in value, and typically in family offices. So you've got, if you're sitting there as a steward of a family office, you're a mutual fund manager, et cetera, and you see a document come across, you see that interview that Ron mentioned, you see some of these other endorsements that Valiant's talking about and teaching you all about in chat, you're going to change your vote, because prudent stewardship mandates that you not ignore this financial fiduciary responsibility that you have to be a steward of the stock to which you've been entrusted and frankly licensed for as well.
That's it. I'm imagining the family office, is that like an FLP, a family limited partnership? Is that the same kind of thing? Okay. I hadn't heard it called a family office before. That's what I thought you meant, though. Was a
Yeah, well,
was
that's
an
what we call them
FLP.
in the tax business. In the tax business,
Okay.
we call them family offices, but they're family limited partner. And they're
No,
usually
they don't have to be FLPs.
they don't
Family
have
office-
to be because some are structured differently, but they're essentially the same thing. So an
Right, they're-
FLP can be in a family office, and also family offices are investment managers that handle the assets regardless of the legal structure that they happen to be put in.
Gotcha.
Most of which are trusts, by the way.
Yeah. And
Ron, I'm sorry, Ron. Go ahead, Ron.
I got nothing to add. Not my area of specialty, and I have been invited to work for a family office in the past, and I said, listen, I'm not in your family.
Yeah. Well, you know why, Ron? They want to lock you down.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of thinking of it.
I wanted to cover this. It came out a couple of days ago. I never really got a chance to address this in a video, but I did start scanning through it. I did like the article, but it just kind of goes to show here we are. The Hollywood Reporter even is just they're all kind of falling here again. They have to acknowledge the reality that's out there lest they look like idiots. We're to that point now. Bob Iger's invincible era is over amid bitter Disney proxy fight. After a major Wall Street firm sides with Nelson Peltz ahead of the April 3rd shareholder meeting, investors are questioning how the CEO plans to plot out growth and his own succession. If Iger were a Marvel superhero, his power would be persuasion. The Disney CEO has long leaned on his ability to convince others of his plans. And that's true. From film and TV writers and directors and stars to Disney shareholders to the company's own board, Iger's track record has been impeccable. Cough, cough. Consider the possibility of the most important deal he ever led, Disney's $4 billion acquisition of Marvel in 2009. While Marvel's while Marvel's success since then is not in dispute, well, hang on. It's not in dispute at least up until 2019. Nobody's going to dispute that success. Since then, it has been an unmitigated train wreck of a disastrous dumpster fire. Also fact. Disney, at the time of the idea of Disney chasing young men via the comic book brand was seen as a real risk. No worries, they didn't. They immediately burned that idea and went after the girls in the comic books. The movies they left alone for a while, but now everything's catching up. Now it's all for the girls, guys. In his 2019 memoir, The Ride of a Lifetime, Iger recalls how he pitched a skeptical Steve Jobs on the deal. Jobs, who had sold Pixar to Disney a few years earlier, was Disney's largest shareholder and a member of the board. He also told Iger that he had never read a comic book in his life. So I brought an encyclopedia of Marvel characters with me to explain the universe to him. Jobs ultimately bought into the idea and called Marvel chairman Ike Perlmutter to vouch for Iger, helping him to seal the deal. 15 years later, and Disney finds itself at a crossroads, facing a bitter proxy fight with Peltz and Trian, backed by billions of dollars in Disney stock owned by Ike Perlmutter, who, of course, got it from Disney when Disney bought Marvel from him. Coming to a head April 3rd. The former Marvel chairman let go last year in a round of corporate cost-cutting. Yeah, again, I'll push back on that. He wasn't let go in a round of corporate cost-cutting. They fired his ass because he was being too abrasive to Bob Iger. That's why. Ike Perlmutter was also the guy who was trying to desperately work behind the scenes to prevent Bob Iger from coming back. Ike Perlmutter was the guy who was still sitting there at Disney with a ceremonial title at that point because he'd been stripped of the real power by Bob Iger years before, turned it all over to Kevin Feige. He was also the guy that was trying to keep Chapek around and trying to get Nelson Peltz into Disney. Remember that SEC filing? Who were the two people that Peltz was always talking to at Disney? Bob Chapek and Ike Perlmutter. So Iger's enemy had to go, which, as we pointed out, I think was one of the reasons that the former CFO, Christine McCarthy, who left last year, I had the feeling that's one of the reasons she decided to peace out. She had just worked to get rid of Nelson Peltz and the proxy stuff the year before. And I posited to the audience out there, I said, if I were Christine McCarthy, the conversation I would have had with Bob Iger after the first proxy fight, after they got Nelson to go away the first time, would have gone something like this. Bob, now listen. We got rid of Nelson. Chapek's gone. You're back in control. We'll find another successor. Just do one thing. Just one thing is all you got to do. For the love of God, do not get pissed off and fire Ike. If you fire him, he's got $3 billion of Disney shares that he can rally against you. He can't do that right now, sitting here as an employee of Disney, holding an executive position at Disney. Just don't fire him. What does Iger do? Fires him. It was a couple months after that Christine McCarthy left. So I'm not saying that's why she left. I'm just saying I got to imagine that might have had something to do with it, and I bet some kind of conversation like that went on at some point.
Wouldn't it be great if it turned out that she also said, well, at least he didn't start up with the state of Florida.
Yeah. Oh, that might have been part of it too. Who knows? In any case, going back to the article here, why can't I have Marvel's? I see this in a financial. They go to this Financial Times interview where Nelson Peltz says, and they have to bring this up. Why do I have to have a Marvel that's all women? Not that I have anything against women, but why do I have to have that? Why can't I have Marvels that are both? Why do I need to have an all-black cast? And comments that mirror critiques of Iger's strategy by Ike Perlmutter. And we talked about this a little bit before.
Not just by Ike Perlmutter.
Yeah. By a lot of people.
By everyone who doesn't work for Disney.
Right. And I mean, and they brought up a point. I think with Perlmutter and Peltz here in this, and this was over a lunch conversation they were having with the interviewer from Financial Times. And there's nothing wrong with it, but why does the compulsion need to be there? Why do we have to have an all-female cast Marvel movie? Like, why that has to be a $300 million expense? Well, part of it is the whole Reimagine Tomorrow. It's the DEI stuff. It's the Sweet Baby Inc. kind of things that go on out there in the gaming industry, right? They push for it. And like we've talked about before, it's fine to do that, but then you have to build that movie in such a way that it's going to financially fit the audience you're gearing it towards, right? You can't spend a full-blown $300 million budget on a movie that's probably only going to appeal to a much smaller audience than your usual fare. And that's part of it. Now, Black Panther was crazy. That was unexpected, and that did something that a lot of people didn't expect it to do. It was put as a lead into Infinity War. It did very well, but we saw what happened with the sequel. Once they removed the strong male lead, they lost over half the audience in the second movie once you correctly adjust for inflation on ticket prices. And the toy sales that places like Hasbro were rolling in it for the first Black Panther movie, and the merchandise sales from other partners out there rolling in it from the first Black Panther movie. They'd never had a huge demographic show up like they did with Black fathers and their sons.
The timing of it, yeah.
Yeah, the timing of it was great. Disney killed all that.
Toys? Did they kill toys?
The Black Panther toys for Wakanda Forever basically sat on the shelves and collected dust because they were all female.
I posted that picture of an entire end cap for $1 each, Shuri dolls, right? Yeah. There's no way that they made any money on those because I guarantee you they paid more than $1 each for those. So they're just trying to get rid of them at that point.
Have you noticed how much financial trouble Hasbro's been having lately? Why do you think that is?
Well, there you go.
That's a big part of it is when you have partnerships with people like Disney and many others where you're paying back these movie studios literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars a year in licensing fees, and you're going to make these toys that in many cases Disney has forced on you to make, even though you know they won't sell because, hey, you know what? If you still want to have Spider-Man, you have to do some Captain Marvel dolls too. And they put that in these contracts, these kind of things. And that's what you get. And you wind up with, well, now we can't sell anything because the whole Marvel franchise is so poisoned by phases 4 and 5 crap that that stuff that used to keep us afloat, like Captain America and Iron Man and Thor just back 4 or 5 years. Yeah, that stuff doesn't sell anymore. Spider-Man's still okay. This is why Disney even keeps Spider-Man separate and apart from Marvel on their own financial reports. Also, because
You know
they
what's hilarious about this is we have come to a point too where, the toy companies they're hurting, right? They become so conglomeratized, or if that's even a word, where there's what, 3 of them left in the whole world? Because they're all owned by like the same 2 or 3 companies. There's none left. And back when we were younger, when they put out less toys and they made less IP, there was tons and tons and tons of toy companies that made lots of money because kids were buying toys. Now, granted, we can. There's a big, huge gap now between kids buying toys and when we were younger. That's obvious. But you have a collector's market now where we pay god awful amounts sometimes for toys, right? Like, here's a great example. I got one right next to me here. This is a toy that you'll pay $40-$50 easy for, right? This is a NECA Toxic Avenger doll, right? I mean, that's insane. That cost them what? $5 to make it best, if that.
Yeah. Well, to physically make it, and then whatever licensing fee they had to pay back.
The licensing fee is the big part, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was where with Lucas, even if they were paying him, because he was the one who made the most off of all these toy deals, right? Yeah. So if I remember right, he would get, I believe, $0.25 per doll sold or produced, one of the two. Either way, he was making it. Yeah, he was making bank
back before he sold it to Disney folks.
Exactly. Nobody else had deals like that on their IPs, right? And that's where a lot of these companies are making their money back. And this is one thing we especially learned with Star Wars, and we were all doing great reporting on this, when we come to find out that the reason why the Rise of Palpatine was the first Star Wars movie in history, not to have a 3 3/4 inch line. The thing that Star Wars made famous, guys, right? Those 3 3/4 inch figures.
Those little Kenner,
movie. Yep. That movie was the first one not to have one of those lines. Do you know why? Because they changed the movie so many damn times. They had a whole warehouse full of figures that were not in the movie. So they just threw their hands up and they said, you know what? We're not doing a line. So whatever happened there, it fell apart. And since that point on, there just hasn't been the synergy or they've destroyed the toy industry.
Yeah, and not to go too deep down that road. I remember
but that was my point. Is we had 20 different companies. Now we're down to 3 or 2 or whatever it is.
Yeah. I remember the rumors for that movie that wasn't there a toy made that was of a Matt Smith character?
I believe so, because he did shoot his stuff. I think he confirmed that. Yeah.
Yeah, Matt Smith, who was at one point he was part of Doctor Who. Right
there was
now he's on
character that was completely eliminated as well. Yeah.
House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones. He plays the character name just slipped my mind. But any case, the king's brother that lived. Any case, he was supposed to be a Sith character or something in that final Star Wars movie. Didn't appear, but there were tons of rumors out there that there were actual Matt Smith toys produced sitting in a warehouse somewhere they had to destroy because he didn't wind up. I mean, the whole thing was a train wreck. But it kind of goes to this next comment in this article. I question his record, Nelson Peltz says, speaking of Kevin Feige. Again, mirroring comments from Perlmutter and sparking a rebuke from Disney, which noted that with $30 billion at the box office, Feige's the top grossing producer of all time. This is just like saying Kathleen Kennedy, look at her track record. It's like, well, let's put a big fat asterisk next to that, right? Because without people like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Richard Donner and Robert Zemeckis, and we can go on and on and on, Kathleen Kennedy doesn't make shit. She was a name plastered up there because she married one of the boys on the team, Frank Marshall. That's why she is where she is. Kevin Feige, in large degree, is where he is because, look, it was set up in the beginning where you had people like Jon Favreau and Ike Perlmutter in there when Marvel Studios, the movie company, was being built years before Disney came in because Marvel was desperate, right? They had fire-sailed the movie rights to Spider-Man to Sony for pennies on the dollar 10 years before or whatever it was because they were desperate and they needed money. And then they sold the theme park rights to Universal Studios in Orlando, again, for cheap because they desperately needed the money. This is why Disney can't get Marvel characters in its theme park in Orlando. They have them in California because the deal was, for folks out there that don't know, the deal was for everything east of the Mississippi. That's what Universal bought from Marvel before they sold it to Disney. And of course, once Disney buys Marvel, they're buying all those contracts that go over to its successors, its assigns, and so on and so forth. So they have to keep honoring these deals with places like Universal and with places like Sony. So short of Sony and Universal literally just deciding to give up the rights one day, they'll have them forever for as long as they want them. So the thing with Feige, though, is that we saw what happened. There was a distinct line in the sand of once Jon Favreau wasn't around anymore, once Ike Perlmutter was sidelined into a ceremonial position of chairman of Marvel Entertainment, which was basically just the comic books, which he also had no creative control over anymore at that point. That was around 2016, 2017. Look at what went into production for Marvel Studios after Kevin Feige was given full autonomous power. Captain Marvel, all of phases 4 and 5, all the Disney Plus shows that are pure trash. It's kind of hard to argue that point. So yeah, we can say that he's been the most successful at the box office, but there was a lot of other people involved, not named Kevin Feige, that were greatly responsible for that.
Well, the more we look back on it, the more we're learning that, right? Like this franchise was built on the shoulders of veteran creatives. Yeah. And once the veteran creatives were kind of out of the picture is when things kind of went downhill, right? Yeah. You had, like you mentioned already, besides that, you had Joe Johnston, you had Kenneth Branagh, you had, a couple of these guys like that. You even had James Gunn, who came in and had to basically structure the entire Infinity Saga, because he said, and this is the part that struck me as crazy, he said they didn't have a plan for what they were going to do with Thanos. Right. They just put him in a cameo and said, well, we'll figure it out later. And Gunn basically said in so many words, and the interview's out there, you can find it. He said in so many words that, like, I didn't have later to plan it. Like, I had to know where this was going for me to tell my story within the universe. So he had to basically map out what he was going to do in Guardians of the Galaxy all the way up through the Infinity Saga. So he knew what was going to happen with his characters, because Thanos was supposed to be, introduced through Guardians of the Galaxy and all that stuff. So like he had to figure this whole thing out, and they didn't have a plan. Yeah. Right. Which is the same thing we heard about Star Wars. Remember? Yep.
There was no plan for that. They had no plan. Yeah. The famous interview, to remind folks, and we may have some new viewers, and I'll just mention this, the famous interview after the movie came out, Daisy Ridley was on one of the one of the late shows, right, or whatever it was, and they asked her about the movie, and she straight up said there was no plan. J.J. Abrams came up to her on the set while they were doing some reshoots and said, "Hey, what would you think about being a Palpatine?" As what she said, they're making the movie up as they were shooting it. This is why that damn movie cost $516 million to complete production. That's before they spent a penny marketing it. And yes, that's a $1 billion box office haul where they actually lost about $150 million on.
Can I just let me just ask one thing about what you got on the screen right now?
Yeah.
Because it was quoted in earlier. This campaign is, in a way, designed to distract us.
Yes, thank you.
By who? Vladimir Putin? Why on earth design, like, he's a shareholder. Why would he want to distract you with he doesn't really want to get on the board. He wants to distract you so you'll do a worse job and make his shares worth less. Like, that's just such a vacuous statement. Is it me?
Yeah, no.
I'll go one further than you, Ron, and I'll say it is true. It is a campaign to distract him. It's to distract him from all this woke bullshit and maybe actually make something worth a crap. Like, in all honesty, because it is true. It kind of is. It's time to, because Peltz would like them to probably just stop everything they're doing right now. And I mean, honestly, we've said it a million times over. The only way to fix this mess at this point is to pull an Elon Musk and literally just come in and fire everybody and have everybody reapply for their jobs and clear out as much of the woke as you could at this point. And any of the Bob, acolytes have to go, right? This needs a complete wash from top to bottom.
Yep. Well, what I wanted to get to here at the end of this piece was something that we
Sorry.
really hadn't covered before. No, that's all right. And that is this. The specifics of this ISS letter, and Disney has since, let's just say, responded to this in some way. I mean, Institutional Shareholder Services, I think this was a real kick in the balls for Disney, no doubt. If we go here talking about the surprise recommendation from ISS to vote for Peltz over the current Disney board member Lagomasino placed a level of uncertainty over the vote, giving Peltz's campaign oxygen at the moment when it needed it the most, maybe on the verge of being snuffed out. Yet the most significantly for Iger, his reputation for making the right call at the right time has been punctured in Disney's ever-evolving succession process. That was the heart of the ISS recommendation. That question was at the heart of the ISS recommendation. Talking about ISS wrote in its blistering report that Chapek's sudden appointment at the onset of the pandemic was not a result of a rigorous process by the board's own admission during engagement with ISS. So they interviewed the Disney board, and apparently ISS walked away with the distinct impression that these guys did not do their due diligence at all when it came to their succession process. But it's something for ISS to just publicly throw this out there like this. It appears there was no structured board-mandated interview process, and that the board primarily relied on Bob Iger's judgment in making this decision. Adding that the board said it encouraged Chapek to build a relationship with Disney's creative executives after naming him CEO, quote, which begs the question of why somebody who was being considered as a contender to succeed Iger hadn't been working on those relationships well before the transition. And it was even noted in other reports that Iger was still controlling a lot of the creative studios after he left the CEO position because of this, or at least that was his opinion. But here we go. The letter doesn't name the internal candidates, the Disney Board Succession Committee comprising of Mark Parker, James Gorman, Mary Barra, and Calvin McDonald sent a letter to ISS on March 22nd, seeking to address, quote, inaccurate assertions in the ISS report. The committee writes that they're meeting frequently and reviewing internal and external candidates with the help of a search firm. Each internal candidate is going through a rigorous preparation process. This includes mentorship from Bob Iger. Yay. And external coaching, engagement with all board members, and comprehensive reviews of each candidate. Yeah, sure. They said this crap last year. And again, nobody at Disney is capable of running this. It has to be an external candidate or else this is pointless. If this winds up being Dana Walden, you can just throw it away. The letter doesn't name the internal candidates, but ISS noted that the Disney board highlighted the work of leaders like Dana Walden, Alec Burdman, Chief of Parks Josh D'Amaro, Jimmy Pitaro, Chief Brand Officer Assad Ayaz, and Iger himself told journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin last November, I've tried hard to conduct my own post-mortem just so that we as a company don't do it again when it comes to succession. He's so magnanimous. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.